Hello and welcome to the Election Corner on One Man Think Tank. Today I'm going to be discussing my 2020 Senate election prediction. As you can see, I've already filled out the safe seats. For those of you who haven't seen one of my predictions before, I do not believe a flipped seat is ever truly safe. Hence, I've put the safe seats, which are flips, as likely. That would be Colorado, Arizona, and Alabama. 2 for the Democrats, 1 for the Republicans. So already the Democrats are starting off with a possible 1-seat gain. An actual 1-seat gain, because I'm moving Michigan from likely to safe. This is already a change from my previous maps, where I have moved Michigan as close to being competitive as leans, and it's now back up to safe. It's gone the full gambit. I think one map I even had it as tilt. But after seeing regular and consistent polling come out of Michigan, while I will admit Gary Peters, the Democratic incumbent, has had trouble breaking 50%, his opponent has had trouble breaking 40% and has only been decreasing. I believe his opponent, John James, kind of was overhyped by individuals, including myself, as this very potent force. He had all the right criteria. He was an African-American Republican, former Air Force, seemed charismatic in his videos, but then he started going, well, I'm for Trump and against Trump, and also he's a Republican running in Michigan. He was already coming from a severe disadvantage. So now the Democrats have Michigan. So let's start doing some likely seats. So the Republicans are the biggest beneficiaries of likely seats right now. In fact, the Democrats don't have any. We'll start off in the Deep South with South Carolina and Kentucky. Both of these states are likely, but for 2 separate reasons. So in Kentucky, you have a very polarizing incumbent in the form of Mitch McConnell, who is, let's be fair, not polling well nationally and is almost universally reviled in his home state. He has a 33% of people approve of him, and I believe 60 some odd disapprove. But he is a Republican, and I'm also going to make the argument, now that the primary has finished, his opponent, Amy McGrath, she has not been doing well at all. She has been all over the place in her advertising and polling, and has sent mixed messages. Sometimes she's come across as very pro-Trump, sometimes very anti-Trump, and she can't really seem to get herself together to go up against Mitch McConnell. It hasn't been since the very successful Moscow Mitch run that Mitch McConnell, it was in any way closer to being in danger. So Kentucky is likely if they had a strong Democrat running, it would actually be leans. On the other hand, we have South Carolina, which should be a safe Republican seat, but has been moved to likely due to how strong of a candidate Jamie Harrison is. He's literally built a campaign that no one thought would succeed, and has been able to push South Carolina into the likely column. Granted, in polling, he usually is in the lower 40s, sometimes upper 30s, but he has managed to pull Lindsey Graham down from mid to high 50s down into the high 40s. Given the fact we are still 4 months out from Election Day, that is honestly a good place to be if you're a challenger, because then you just need to get that last little bit going. And forgive me, I'm a little bit phlegmy. That's a good place to be, especially with Donald Trump actively throwing his entire party under the bus in order to basically not have his biases challenged. We could very well see Lindsey Graham be one of the casualties of this if, Election Day comes around and it just perfectly times itself, but we also need to keep in mind voter suppression and the like. So for right now, it's likely. Another likely state would be Texas. This is going to be very disappointing for any left-wing Democrats out there. Well, left-wing. Any Democrats or left-leaning individuals out there. But Texas right now is likely Republican. The incumbent John Cornyn, once seeming a lot weaker than Ted Cruz, because he wasn't a very polarizing figure, he was also a not very memorable figure, has gone from being a weakness to a strength. However, he has polled not as well against his opponent MJ Hagar as I was expecting him to. I thought he'd be breaking 50s at this point. He's now in the high 40s. Well, Hagar is almost perfectly at that 39-40 margin the entire time. As such, I'm going to say Texas right now is likely Republican, with, like I said with South Carolina, if his opponent is powerful enough and can build enough momentum, we could see this race get more competitive. And two more likely states. The first is Alaska. Alaska is one of, if I had a choice, I would say let's talk about Alaska for 48 hours, and because it's just such an interesting state when you look at how it views the party politics. It is one of the few, I would say probably the only state, where you truly have a two-party system where the two parties still heavily overlap with each other. And you get very libertarian-minded Democrats and very libertarian-minded Republicans who are all very focused on protecting the Alaskan social safety net as well. So it's this fascinating overlap. But at the federal level, they typically vote Republican because Republicans will leave everything up to the states. However, due to Donald Trump approving the drilling of the Alaska wilderness, North Slope, I believe, Alaska Wildlife Refuge, sorry about that, which includes the North Slope, but still, as well as a very unpopular Republican governor, and honestly, the fact that Sullivan, the guy running, does not have the entrenched support of Native Alaskans that someone like Lisa Murkowski does. He's not safe either. And his opponent, I believe, whose name is Van Helsing, is an independent who's polling decently as an independent. We've seen like 2 polls, but they are decent polls. So for right now, I'm willing to put Alaska as a likely state, and we'll see how it shakes up closer to Election Day. Because also, when you're 4 months out from Election Day for like South Carolina, Texas, Alaska, and Kentucky even, it's very easy to make calls for, oh, well, they're likely right now because you could make up ground, but they're only going to grow further apart. It's only going to become more obvious by Election Day because Harrison can make up a lot of ground between now and November. However, on October 31st, if he's polling at where he is now, he's got no chance of winning under the polling, any reasonable chance of winning. Okay. And one last likely Republican, the Georgia special election, not the main election. And I'll explain why why the main election's not up when that comes up, but the special election is likely for one key reason. The Democrats, well, one, they're not unifying around a single candidate, but they have not put out interesting candidates. It seems like Warnock still will be their nominee, Raphael Warnock, but I'm not sure, honestly, because Lieberman, another Democratic candidate, is still sticking into this race, and it's a jungle primary, so everyone's just going to vote, and on all of the candidates, and whoever the top 2 are, will go into a runoff together. So it's looking like there will be 1 Republican and 1 Democrat, but we're not sure. Well, we can kind of guess the Republican, because the Laufer, the Republican incumbent, is polling horribly and has a pretty, not mainstream in their ideology, but mainstream challenger who has broken the mainstream. And he is polling very well and will most likely knock her out of the ballot. And Laufer was a historically bad candidate that could have, if she won and was running against someone like Warnock, would have put this race in a possibly blue category. But it looks likely like she's going to lose, and when compared to her, any Republican looks a lot closer, looks, without scandal, very good. So I'm actually going to argue this is a likely race, and it is less likely the Democrats will win the special election than the main election. Now, speaking of leans states, let's do some leans and give the Democrats a few more on the board. Actually, before we do that, one brief note. This is the map you should look at for what the toss-up states are. I personally do not leave any states as toss-up. I believe that's a cop-out unless you truly cannot tell, which, given a state, you can usually make a call even if it's 51-49. But here you have, but these are our toss-up states: Montana, Kansas, Iowa, Georgia's main election, North Carolina, and Maine. Democrats have 48, so they've already picked up one seat. Republicans have 46. No one's getting a supermajority here, but someone could walk away with a very strong victory at the Senate level that gives them a lot of wiggle room. You see, in the Senate, due to the fact there are only 100 representatives, conservative members or liberal members of the Democratic Party can find themselves voting against the party line in order to preserve themselves for re-election. This is this is typical par for the course for the Democrats. The Republicans rarely ever do this because they will vote party line on everything. But the more seats the Democrats win, the more wiggle room their conservative members have, and the more likely progressive legislation gets passed, which the general Democratic Party wants, but the Democratic Party of West Virginia might be a little bit more tepid on. So, yeah, of course I'm referencing Joe Manchin. So, here we go. The first lean state is a leans Democrat for Montana. As many people have been joking on the internet, the state is safe Steve. You have Steve Bullock versus Steve, what's-his-face? Steve Bullock, former governor, was not expected to run in this seat until he filed the day before the election deadline and is now polling incredibly well. We're talking 46, 47, 48. While his opponent, who, against a more generic Democratic candidate, was polling in the high 40s, is now in the low 40s. That is not a good place to be as a Republican, to see your numbers suddenly flip like that. And it really shows the power of Steve Bullock as a personality in the state of Montana. As such, I am flipping this to a Democratic victory, not because it is likely because the state is getting more Democratic, but rather Steve Bullock is the guy to win Montana, in my opinion. Kansas is a tilt state, we'll get back to that. Iowa. Now, people are starting to say, well, Iowa's looking a lot more blue because all of a sudden the Republican incumbent, Joni Ernst, her polling numbers have dropped while her opponent has started polling better than her, but they're both around the mid-40s, about 3 points away from each other. And as such, until I see the Democratic Senator opponent, I'm blanking on her name, you'll have to forgive me, but until we see either Joni Ernst dropping even heavier, or her opponent, it's not Blankenship, it starts with a B, I think, getting higher. Oh, Greenfield. It's Greenfield. I don't know where I got the B from. Her opponent Greenfield polling even higher. I'm going to put this state as tilt Republican because it's very easy to be for or against a generic Democrat, but it also tells you how people are likely going to vote when they are not angry about a coronavirus pandemic. So for right now, I'm seeing a definite straightforward path for the Democrat, and if she can win and if she keeps this up for another month, then I'm willing to flip this to the Democratic Party. For right now, I'm not. And since we're knocking off tilts, let's also do Kansas. I don't know why I flipped over it before. This is another tilt Republican. So originally it was only going to be tilt Republican if Chris Kobach was the nominee. The other one, Marshall, was for the Republican nominee. The other one, Marshall, was polling very well. He is not polling very well anymore. He's actually polling on par with Kobach against the likely, or I think selected Democratic opponent. As such, I still think they have a chance of winning, but it's going to be a slim opportunity, especially in a state that really hates Chris Kobach, and apparently isn't that big of a fan of Marshall either. Down to Georgia, where I'm actually going to be putting the special election as another tilt Republican. I really am starting to feel like I may start moving it towards the Democratic side, but you have Perdue versus Ossoff. You may remember Ossoff from running in the first big special election after Trump's election and losing quite handily, but Perdue has been dropping, and it's mostly because he's an incumbent in the Trump Republican Senate, which has very low approval ratings and keeps screwing up. While Ossoff is already well known, he's a very, frankly, charming individual, at least that's how he's being interpreted as, and is polling quite well. In fact, he's even beating out Perdue in 1 or 2 polls, which should be a pretty big signal because Perdue has been steadily dropping. So the fact that we're seeing people leaving Perdue and going to his opponent, Ossoff, is a good sign that this election could end up flipping. Right now, not enough for me to go, well, George is blue, but you see where I'm coming from. Up to North Carolina, we have it's going to be a tilt Democratic seat. This is down from leans for one main reason. The North Carolina Democratic Party and their incumbent, Cal Cunningham, has not been polling well. He has been beating Tillis, the incumbent Republican, but by 1 or 2 points, and they're both in the mid-40s. The incumbent always gets a little bit of a boost, but you have a popular Democratic popular Democratic governor up for re-election, which I think could be Cal Cunningham's saving throw here. And lastly, we have Maine, which I'm moving from tilt Democratic to leans Democratic for one main reason. We are witnessing as Susan Collins' campaign collapse. She is not doing a very good job of maintaining any of her, frankly, credibility in the state. And honestly, Maine has become a vastly more blue state than last time she was reelected. Not to mention, we just got the ruling from the Supreme Court justice she supported, who, Boofer. I can't remember his actual name. But he, after claiming, oh no, he'll protect abortion rights, he's so grand, turns out, he's not protecting abortion rights, which further hurt her. This leaves us with our final Senate map, 51 Democrats, 49 Republicans, and frankly, this is only going to get better for the Democrats unless something massively changes in the next 4 months, which back in March I was willing to imagine was going to happen with, like, coronavirus fading, but at this point I'm half expecting a meteor to come down and just wipe out all of these plains states right here, guaranteeing Democrats the Senate. So, there you have it. So, if you liked the video, leave a like down below and drop a comment while you're down there. If you want to see more from the channel, click the subscribe button and the notification bell so you can see when new content is released. Otherwise, as always, have a wonderful day.